In 1993, the brutal murder of 3 young boys in West Memphis, Arkansas, left the community reeling with fear and anger. Suspicion focused on 3 teenage misfits whose taste for heavy metal and the occult made them easy targets. The prosecution made them out to be satanic devil worshippers who had taken part in ritual killing. The 3 teens, Damien Eccles,
even after I die, people are going to remember me forever.
Jason Baldwin,
I don't really understand how they convicted me or got me in here.
and Jesse Miskelly.
You might as well just go ahead and kill me right now, because I ain't no way I'm gonna spend the rest of my life in prison.
They became known as the West Memphis Three, and despite a lack of evidence, they were convicted of murder. Damien, the alleged ringleader, was sentenced to death. 3 years later, Paradise Lost brought national attention to the case. The film raised questions about the guilt of the West Memphis Three. People like Johnny Depp.
Well, I can empathize with being judged by how you look as opposed to who you are.
Eddie Vedder, Natalie Maines from the Dixie Chicks, and Henry Rollins all took notice and began raising awareness about the story. Our own Adam McGoyan has signed on to make a feature film about the case. It'll star Reese Witherspoon as a mother of one of the victims. And then, just last August, as Joe Berlinger was putting the finishing touches on Paradise Lost 3, a film that presents the most convincing evidence yet pointing to the innocence of the West Memphis Three, well, at that moment, a bombshell was dropped.
At this moment, the West Memphis Three are free.
After spending almost 2 decades in prison, the West Memphis Three walked out of an Arkansas courthouse as free men. A Hollywood ending, right? Well, not quite. For the West Memphis Three, freedom has come with a heavy cost. Please welcome Joe Berlinger. Nice to see you, man.
Good to see you.
How are things?
Good, man. Good to see you again.
Yeah, absolutely. I think last time was on the Metallica film.
Yes.
And here we are back.
That was a few years ago, wasn't it?
It really was. We can talk about that later, but 20 years with the West Memphis Three, I mean, what was your reaction when you heard the news they were going to be released?
Well, when I heard they were going to be released, I was excited, but we didn't know the full details. But when we got down there and actually witnessed it, I had a range of emotions: tears, joy, anger, frustration. You know, I'm not sure if everyone is aware, but in order to get out of prison, they had a plea to lesser charges because the state of Arkansas didn't have the courage to fully exonerate these guys. And so they walk out of prison, which everyone is thrilled about, but they walk out of prison as convicted killers, which is total BS.
Right.
That's because the state doesn't want to get sued for wrongful conviction for destroying their youth. I mean, they went into prison as 16, 17, and 18-year-old boys.
Yeah.
Teens, and they come out as men, having spent their entire youth behind bars, with Eccles having been on death row and treated horribly, you know, shackled most of the time, living in a little box, no sunlight for the last decade. I mean, one of the most amazing anecdotes we've heard since his release is that during Hurricane Irene, he stood on the balcony of a friend's apartment, and, you know, everyone's taking cover, and he's standing, you know, on the balcony just wanting to get pelted by rain because he literally hasn't felt rain on his skin for 20 years or 18 years. But.
So what happens to these guys? Because you're right, they're convicted killers in the eyes of the law, and this is the system we have, and so this is just what we go by.
Right.
And it would be interesting to see if people ignore that legal, like in the way that when OJ was acquitted, everybody just still said OJ did it.
Right.
Even though, and so they would not afford OJ due process.
Right.
I wonder if they would give the same lack of due process to these guys. Do you think they're going to be walking around? Do they have to get out of that state? Like, where are they going to go?
Yeah, well, Eccles got into a plane provided by Eddie Vedder of Pearl Jam and left the state and said he's never coming back. Yeah. You know, I'm not sure what Baldwin is going to do. Miss Kelly is in the state right now, but you know, I'd leave that state and never come back, man.
I'm glad you brought up Eddie. I first heard about the film through Henry Rollins, and you know, Rollins was a big supporter of Free the West Memphis Three, and the music community really played a role. Eddie Vedder was apparently, you said from the beginning, but no one ever knew.
Well, not quite from the beginning, but early on. Or, you know, Henry was one of the earliest supporters, and Eddie came on board pretty quickly thereafter. But he, until very recently, he did not go public. You know, one of the reasons is, you know, if people remember the film or the story, one of the reasons these guys were convicted was because, God forbid, they were fans of Metallica music. Yeah. And in fact, Metallica lyrics were actually introduced into the trial to demonstrate that these kids were satanic devil worshippers, which was insane. I mean, you know, Metallica lyrics have nothing to do with devil worshiping.
No, I mean, there's Slayer and Venom. There are a lot of bands.
Yeah, exactly. So Eddie's attitude was, you know, like the last thing these guys need is support from a anti-establishment rock and roller, you know.
Right.
So in terms of public support, so Vedder's support was always behind the scenes, serious financial support. And then Peter Jackson came into the picture with some serious financial support, and he also wanted to keep it anonymous. So, I mean, there's just, for whatever reason, predominantly the music industry, but I would also say in general the entertainment industry. Johnny Depp was a big supporter. It just, you know, took hold. And I think the reason is, you know, people identify with Damien Echols. You know, a guy like Johnny Depp grows up in rural Kentucky. You know, he himself has said, you know, I looked a little different, I dressed a little different. You know, that easily could have been me under the right circumstances.
And so
because they were picked out and persecuted for dressing in black, listening to heavy metal music. I mean, that was basically the only evidence that was presented at the trial.
What does that teach you about forgiveness, this project?
You know, you gotta honor the truth, you know? I mean, and people don't have the courage to honor the truth. I mean, the truth rises to the top. And I think that's why the first film, even though it showed both sides, and interestingly, in the first film, a good 20% of the people walked away from Paradise Lost thinking they were guilty. Mm-hmm. So it's not like we were banging a message over people's head, but for me, the truth rises to the top, and part of that is forgiveness.
The Metallica thing was obviously another big part of your story.
In fact, I'm seeing the guys tomorrow. You know, look, Lars and I have become very good friends. I mean, if Lars was not a, you know, if Lars was not a rock and roll star, he would be a film producer. And he, you know, we met because the music in Paradise Lost is primarily Metallica music.
And they donated that to you?
And they were, you know, now they've given music to films quite a bit, but at the time they had a hard and fast rule. We don't give our music for anything. And when they saw a rough cut of the movie, and I basically said to them, you know, heavy metal music is on trial as much as these kids. And they really responded, gave us the music, and it started a friendship. And Lars, in particular, was very proud of that film and was kind of the force behind Some Kind of Monster, which has its own trippy story to it, because it didn't start out as a movie. It just started out as a little side project that was going to be some bonus material on a CD at a time when downloading was killing the music industry. They want, you know, all the record labels were looking for stuff like that. But then Jason Newsted quit the band. They brought in that performance coach. I was already there shooting, and both Lars and I realized there was a film to be made. And those guys had the guts to make that film. You know, a lot of fans are like, oh my God, how could you show that side of you?
Yeah.
That's, to me, the very metal to do that, to have the courage to take your own image apart. You know?
For this film here, the Purgatory film, you've shot it, you've got 12 extra minutes that will be attached to it, dealing with the release. What do you think life after prison is going to be like for the West Memphis Three?
God, I can't imagine having spent the kind of time they spent in prison, you know, and you know, Jason told me when he first got there, they used to kick him and beat him up, you know, call him child killer. That changed, interestingly, he tells us, when Paradise Lost came out. They went from saying child killer to like, hey man, you're gonna get out one day, raw deal, you know, which was so. But Echols was treated horribly on death row the entire time, you know, real deprivation.
I mean, that's going to change.
I mean, he has physical things he has to work through. Like his legs were shackled most of the time. You know, he has to learn how to really walk again. I mean, it's not like he's crippled, but you know, when your legs are shackled for most of your adult life, it has an impact. His eyesight is inferior. He has dental issues. So first, it just has to get used to the physical. You know, eating good food is, you know, it's like someone being liberated from a concentration camp. So, you know, I think they'll do well.
The film is called Paradise Lost 3: Purgatory. Joe Berlinger, everybody. We'll be right back.